I really like painting the Moulder units in my skaven army this weird pale blue with a dark purple on their heads and outer limbs. And while I really like this, lately I've been thinking about how to push this further, sort of adding more hues and experimenting with color variants while still staying within that same color scheme. And I really want to try it out on the most recent Master Moulder. Going over a black prime, I'm going to give the entire model a base coat of signal blue. Since the model will mostly be that pale blue, I think this dark signal blue really helps sets the tone and will make the painting a lot easier as it's a fun shadow color to layer up from, and I'd rather have the deepest shadows be a dark blue rather than the black primer. And the primer I used was semi-glossy and really highlighted how heavily detailed this model is, especially for one with such a closed-off pose. So moving forward, I really wanted to cover most of it with a base color to help simplify what was going on and make it easier to both paint, but also to just visually scan and make sense of. As he's basically a mound of flesh, I very much painted him like that. First mixing Warlord Purple and Imperial Blue to get a purple leaning blue, and then added white until it was a nice mid-tone value-wise. I added this all over the flesh, which made up a bulk of the model, and then started adding white, building up the shapes and lumps, but also keeping in mind to simplify that overall mountain shape and keep the highlights the whitest towards the top. I probably overall added additional white about 3 times to my mix, making increasingly lighter colors, but not really taking it to a final highlight step, as I wanted to build up some of the other sections to get a better read on the model. For the extremities and head, as well as that little freaky guy growing on him, I picked them out with purple, this time mixing 2 parts Warlord Purple with 1 part Imperial Blue, keeping it harmonious with the rest of the skin. This is a pretty dark color, which is nice, but for highlights, I'm just going to add more Warlord Purple, brightening it up, but also keeping some of the dark purple base to the side, as we'll use it later. For these highlights, I want to focus on the raised sections, but overall want to keep the highlights limited to smaller areas so it still reads as a darker purple color. To really crisp up these highlighted sections, I'll add white and pick out certain edges or small sections like knuckles and the nose. If this is getting too stark, I just add water to the previous color and use it like a glaze to blend all these steps together. To differentiate the hair on the purple sections, I'll add white to the original dark purple color and pick out the strands, adding even more white for an ultimate highlight. Overall, I'm really enjoying how much color variety we got just by adding different amounts of colors in these mixes. Especially how the midtone with just extra Warlord Purple contrasts the sections where white was also added, making the nose and other areas really fleshy and interesting, compared to if we just added one light color to a dark base and used those colors for everything. With the purple sections done, we're going to blend them in and add some more depth to this gnarly little blueberry. I first mix Warlord Purple and Signal Blue 50-50 and add some watered down matte medium until it's the transparency and consistency of a wash. Using a medium instead of just water will let me apply it a bit more liberally without having to worry about like water staining or tide marks. The only thing that's weird about this is that matte medium is white while wet, so even though it dries mostly clear, it sort of throws off the color of the mix, whereas something like Lamia medium is always clear. And I add this around where the purple parts meet the rest of the model and on the lower sections of the blue, dragging my brush down towards where I want the most color to be and also just adding it to anywhere that needs some extra definition. After this, I mix up some very light blue and re-highlight some of the areas as that previous step just darkens it a bit. And I like to use this as an opportunity to really push the contrast and value around the top of the model, really picking out all of the sculpted fur and lumps. I then make a similar wash with matte medium, only this time with magenta paint, and start covering that exposed flesh area on the top of his back, looking to tint the whole area a wounded magenta color, but also letting the color settle the most concentrated into the grooves. While doing this, I kept some of the clean matte medium with no paint to the side and used that to disperse the magenta wash on some of the raised areas, using it to help push around and manipulate the wash into where I wanted it to go. Overall, I went quite thin with this and slowly built it up to my liking, and it was also used around the other lumpy clusters found on the model. While waiting for this section to dry, I again really tried to push the highlights on the fur and blue skin, trying to make it more of an off-white as I did a final pass on the most raised areas, picking out the fur and that ridge surrounding the exposed lump, as well as the tiny rats on the model. And right now that exposed area was looking pretty gross, but in order to push it further and add some color variety to the model, I first mixed yellow and white into a pale yellow, and then added just the tiniest amount of purple to desaturate it. And this was used as a highlight on that wounded area, setting it apart from the rest of the model. But this incorporation of yellow added a lot of visual interest, as well as making it look truly visceral. More white was added and used to give it a sort of shine, running really thin lines and dots over the different clumps. With mostly all of the organic parts out of the way, we're going to give all of the leather or metal parts a pass of dried bark. This is nice to just immediately set them apart and gives a nice foundational color to everything. It's kind of scary since we don't want to misplace any paint, so I pick out all of the easy parts with a larger brush before switching over to something smaller for the more careful or tight to reach places. And if something was too wedged in there, I just don't even worry about it. The teeth were done with a mix of dry bark and white, adding more white towards the ends of the teeth as a highlight, while this same color was used, but in really tiny amounts on the claws over the signal blue base, making them appear dark and shiny. For the leather parts, I'm going to mix orange brown and charred brown in an even mix, creating a sort of desaturated peanut butter color, which is perfect as a mid-tone. I place this mostly all over the leather, matching my brush strokes with the flow of the material and doing multiple passes to build up opacity towards the raised folds and ends, adding white for more contrast and brighter highlights, capturing the edges sculpted into the skaven leather. The tail was created by first making a light, vivid pink from white and warlord purple. This was added in increasing amounts to dried bark as we got closer to the end of the tail until it was just pure light pink. This added a lot of nice color variance as when the mix was more dried bark heavy, it was darker and desaturated, but adding the light pink not only brightened it in value, but increased its saturation, giving it a very cool contrasting look. The rest of my Skaven army uses true metallics, so I'm going to follow suit here, but I still want them to be visually interesting and fun to paint. For the silvers, I'll be using iron warriors, and the gold will be polished gold. I mostly employ a splotchy stippling technique, letting the base coat do a lot of work and show through acting as a shadow. And for this metallic application, I'm mostly trying to hit the areas that are facing upwards and giving them a reflective sheen and making sure I hit the edges to define the shapes. The main component here is that man catcher weapon, and I'm sort of hitting contrasting sides of each bladed part with a coarse application, not being too precious, more so just trying to create something that's interesting. To add some extra color, I'm going to be using those same washes that I made. First with the magenta one over the gold, using it to smooth out that coverage, keeping the brightest parts that shiny gold, but helping to transition them into the shadows with the wash and adding a lot of interest across the gold and into the darker colors. The orb areas will get the same treatment, pulling the wash across the gold so it settles at the bottom. And this is nice because the purple magenta color just adds a really nice richness to the gold. The silver then gets the indigo wash, again just smoothing out the coverage a bit and working some color into the shadows. This is fun because not only does it just add more interest and color, but since the model overall is very blue, it also sort of helps to look like the metal is picking up all those colors and its reflections. I'm then going to add quite a bit of white to the wash so that it's mostly back to acting like a typical paint, and do some edge highlighting on the topmost edges and make some extreme highlights along the sharpest points. I do this same process to the gold using a really pale yellow, edge highlighting the very tops of all the prongs and some extreme areas. I like this as it ensures that there's always a very extreme highlight to the metals, giving them a sheen, and used sparingly, it still fits in with the true metallic paint. All of the little crystals and that bit of piping are picked out with imperial blue, with white added to it for the highlights. I want these areas to be really high contrast as they're gems or magical elements, so I jump up quite a bit in value and then use thin down layers of a middle color to sort of fade them together. As a final touch, I'll do the eyes. First, using a white dot before applying Warlord Purple over the greater area. This helps to give it a bit of a glow as the white spot creates a focus and light source. Overall, I'm really happy with this. I took a few risks trying new things, but was really happy with how I pushed it, striving for a greater color variance within the color scheme and more visual interest than I've done with previous Moulder models. This is really cool too, since this is such a weirdly detailed model. I'm glad I was able to sort of calm it down visually and simplify it a bit with the paint scheme, but still make something really interesting. And in particular, I love the way the small growth-like guy turned out, which when this model was first released, I was super skeptical of that, but I'm really glad I made it work. By sort of separating him with the purple, it makes him look really intentional, and I really love the way the little head and the two hands have this sort of repetition of three elements, making a really cool design motif. I'm really happy with all the extra color I pushed into this, and I can't wait to paint more models. Thanks for watching.